She tried to tow a car from my driveway. Too bad it belonged to the sheriff. I kept my mouth shut, let her call the truck, and waited for the cruiser to turn the corner. If you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen who thinks a clipboard outranks common sense, tap like, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the moment her power trip runs into the law. My name is Grant Wilder. I'm 46 years old, born in farm country, raised to shake hands, look a person in the eye, and keep my word. I live on Cedar Ridge Court in a neighborhood that looks like a postcard. Trim lawns, white mailboxes in a neat line, porch flags on holidays and flower beds. People baby like grandchildren. Folks wave when they drive by. We barbecue in July and share snowblowers when the drifts come up to your knees. If you looked at us from the air, you'd swear peace lives here. And most days it does. What the drone can't see is the little office behind the clubhouse, where one woman stacks papers like ammunition and fires off emails like warning shots. Her name is Marla Benton, president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, and she treats our bylaws like they were carved onto stone tablets and handed down on the clubhouse steps. I'm not a rabble-rouser. I'm a facilities tech at the high school and a part-time handyman on weekends. I keep my truck clean, my grass short, and my driveway clear. I even know where the spare couplings are for the sprinkler main by lot 19 because I fixed it after a freeze 3 years back, while the HOA vendor was still evaluating scope. I tell you that so you know I'm not looking for a fight. Fights come find some of us anyway, especially if we live down the block from a person who believes she was born to supervise. My first real run-in with Marla started over my trash cans. We have a rule that bins go behind the fence by dusk on pickup day, which is fine. A Tuesday in late spring, I got home late from changing fluorescent ballasts in the school gym, and my cans were still at the curb. I was 10 minutes late, maybe 15. When I pulled them back, a neon sticky note fluttered off the lid. As a friendly reminder, Cedar Ridge expects residents to maintain neighborhood standards. MB. I laughed, shrugged, and set a reminder on my phone. The second week I was out of town. Came home to a letter. First warning. That one didn't make me laugh. It's one thing to care about the place you live. It's another to keep score like you're running a league. I stuck the warning on my fridge for a while, then tossed it when it got covered in pizza magnet coupons and wasn't good for anything except raising my blood pressure when I opened the door for milk. 2 weeks after that, my friend Deputy Nate Collins called. We've known each other since we were kids throwing rocks into the creek behind Stenson's Hardware. He works for the Rivers County Sheriff's Office. Quiet guy, solid like a fence post buried in concrete. Wilder, he said, I'm working a 2-week special detail. I don't want my unmarked sitting at the substation overnight. Vandalized 3 windshields last month. Can I park it at your place? Safer in a driveway that isn't on anyone's revenge list. Bring it over, I said. I've got space in the driveway. I'll pull my truck into the garage. Do me a favor, he added, a smile in his voice. Don't let any cowboys kick the tires. I'll treat it like it belongs to the Pope, I told him. He rolled in just after dark with a black Dodge Charger that looked like any Charger if you didn't know what the little extras meant. The low-profile antenna, the quiet light strip tucked behind the windshield tint, the extra radio cord coiled near the console. He parked on the left side, nose toward the street, and tossed me a sunshade. Keeps people from staring, he said. He locked it, and we went inside. We watched the Cardinals lose by 1 and pretended we weren't upset. The next morning I went to work. When I came home around 4, the Charger still sat where he left it, sunshade up. But I also saw Marla circling it, phone out, stepping this way and that like she was taking pictures for a used car site. She wore a pink linen blouse, white capris, and an expression that said she'd finally found proof that someone other than her had made a mistake. Afternoon, I said, stepping out of my truck. She didn't say hi. She didn't add neighbor the way people do when they're about to scold you. She pointed at the roof antenna like she'd spotted a horn on a house cat. Is this a government vehicle? It's a friend's car, I said. He's staying nearby, asked to leave it for a few days. Cedar Ridge Covenants, Section 14, Subsection B, she said without looking down. No commercial or government vehicles may be stored on premises overnight. I'll be issuing a notice. Stored? I said, calm as I could make it. It's parked in my driveway. Temporarily, she took a picture of the rear plate. Call it what you like. The rule's the rule. If it's not removed in 24 hours, it will be towed. We can't make exceptions for one person and keep standards for everyone else. Marla, I said, I know you've got a job to do, but this is a friend's car for a short spell. She smiled in a way that didn't touch her eyes. Then your friend can find somewhere appropriate to keep his equipment. Good afternoon, Grant. She tapped something into her phone, turned, and walked back up the sidewalk like she owned the concrete and the grass on both sides. That night I got the email. Final warning, the subject line said. Even though I hadn't gotten a first or a second, the body quoted subsection B just as promised. It said a contract tow company would be dispatched at 7 a.m. if the non-compliant vehicle remained. It CC'd the board. Ed Hanley, treasurer, Ruth Daly, secretary, and Stan Patel, vice president. The only person not on the thread was me, the actual owner of the driveway. I read it twice. Then I called Nate. He laughed hard enough to cough. She's going to tow a sheriff's car out of a citizen's driveway? And she put it in writing? She did, I said. I'm supposed to make it disappear by 7. Don't touch it, Nate said, his voice going from amused to professional. Don't move it. Keep your doorbell cam rolling. If anyone comes on your property, tell them they are being recorded and to state their business. We'll let this play out by the book. I'm not trying to make your life harder. You won't, he said. You might make my morning educational for a few people. Get some sleep, Grant. I'll see you early, sleep. That's a word. I tried. I lay on my back thinking about how a person gets to a point where they enjoy making other people jump. Some folks collect stamps. Some collect fines. I stared at the ceiling fan, clicked the remote, watched a fishing show I didn't care about, and woke up at 5 with the TV asking me if I wanted to keep watching. I made coffee strong enough to stand on, put out a second mug, and sat at the kitchen table with the window cracked. Dawn slid into the cul-de-sac in gray stripes. At 6:50, I heard a diesel engine idle down the block. At 6:55, a tow truck rolled to the curb across from my driveway and parked with its hazard blinkers ticking like a metronome. Marla arrived at 6:57, which told me she wanted to be present at the victory. She wore a floral bathrobe over a white tee, fuzzy slippers, and a face of victory. She carried a clipboard and, God help me, a travel mug that said Queen in gold letters. She marched to the tow driver, a guy about my age with a goatee and the posture of someone who'd been yelled at all night by dispatcher and drunk customers. They talked. She pointed. He squinted at the charger. I stepped out, set my coffee mug on the hood of my truck and said, Morning. Good morning, Mr. Wilder, Marla said brightly, like we were neighbors again. We have a policy to enforce. Thank you for your cooperation. The tow driver half lifted a hand. I'm just here for the ticket number. You the owner? No, sir, I said. A friend parked it here for a few days. He peered at the plate. Looks like a government ride. Marla laughed a short little laugh. We don't let people store work equipment on site. If we let you, everyone would do it. The driver shrugged, because a tow is a tow, whether it's a grandma's Buick or a patrol car painted invisible. He backed up, swung his bed, and clanked the dollies down. He rolled a little jack under the rear and started hooking. Somewhere between the second ratchet and the third, the tow truck's radio squawked and the driver glanced over my shoulder. I turned and saw a black and white cruiser ease around the corner and stop wide of the scene like a cat crouching to observe birds. Deputy Nate Collins stepped out, uniform crisp, sunglasses on, cap tucked under his arm. He doesn't do swagger. He does quiet, which is worse for people who only know how to read loud. Morning, he said to the group like he'd wandered into a bake sale that had gotten out of hand. What's going on? Marla switched to honey voice, the one she uses for bake sales and new neighbors. Deputy, hi. We have a vehicle here in violation of our community standards. We're just removing it. Nate glanced at the charger, then at me, then at the tow driver. He walked to the rear plate, tilted his head and pulled out his phone. He tapped and tucked it away. He reached into his breast pocket, flipped open leather, and held it at a polite height. I'm Deputy Collins with the Rivers County Sheriff's Office. You're correct, ma'am. That is a government vehicle. It's assigned to the Sheriff's Office. It was parked here with permission. Marla smiled the smile people wear when they think something suddenly works in their favor. So you agree it shouldn't be stored overnight? What I agree, Nate said, still calm, is that you just authorized tampering with government property. This car is evidence capable. You called a vendor to remove it without a lawful order. That's a problem. Color left Marla's face the way a tide goes out. Slow, unstoppable. The tow driver froze. Officer, he said, hands up a little. I go where the ticket goes. I'm unhooking right now. That would be wise, Nate said. Please step away from the vehicle until you do. The driver slid the dollies out like he was disarming a bomb. He rolled them back into place on the truck bed and wiped his hands on a rag he pulled from his pocket. He looked tired and a little mad, but mostly relieved. No harm done, right? He said. No harm, Nate said. So long as nobody touches it again without my office's say-so. He turned to me. Grant, do you mind if I get the notice the HOA sent you? And if you'd CC the board when you forward it, that'd be helpful. Happy to, I said, the words tasting like a slice of pie. Marla found her voice. Deputy, we have rules. If we don't apply them evenly, our property values... Nate took off his sunglasses and tucked them into his shirt. His eyes are the kind that look kind until they don't. Ma'am, you have covenants for lawn height and fence material. You don't outrank the state vehicle code or the sheriff's office. You will not direct a tow of any law enforcement vehicle on private property without a lawful order ever again. Are we clear? She nodded once. Tiny. I didn't know. That's why I'm explaining it now, he said. He put his sunglasses back on. Have a safe morning. He didn't linger. He didn't gloat. He got in his cruiser, gave me a little two-finger wave off the steering wheel like we were leaving a diner at the same time, and rolled away. The tow truck left in the opposite direction. Marla stood there with her queen mug and clipboard like a statue someone forgot to put in a museum. Then she turned, marched up her driveway, and shut her door. I went inside and sent the email. I attached the HOA notice and said, as requested by Deputy Collins, forwarding the document in which the HOA directed a tow of a law enforcement vehicle parked with permission on private property, I CC'd the board and left off commentary because the video from my doorbell cam said everything better than I could say with words. 15 minutes later, a reply came from the board's general inbox. We have received your message. That was it. No apology. No our bad. I shrugged and poured another coffee. If the story stopped there, it would be a funny neighborhood story you tell at Thanksgiving while your aunt shakes her head and says, mercy. But people who love power don't let go after one slap on the wrist. They drift off, plot, and come back with a smile like they're delivering muffins. The neighborhood grapevine went red hot. I watched blinds twitch. A couple of folks walking dogs paused just long enough to ask me, very gently, if I was having trouble with the association. I told them the facts. Their eyebrows went up and their heads tilted the way they do when you watch a tightrope walker and can't tell if you should clap or call an ambulance. By Wednesday afternoon, an email hit the inboxes. Special meeting, Thursday 7 p.m. Agenda item, vehicle storage compliance. That was bureaucratic for, come see the fireworks. The clubhouse sits by the little retention pond with the fountain that looks like champagne when the sun hits it right. At 6:45, the parking lot was full enough to push people to the street. I walked in with Nate's printed reply folded in my pocket, just in case. People clustered in polite clumps, whispering like church ladies. The board table sat at the front, draped in a navy cloth. Marla sat dead center in a blazer the color of wet cement. On her right, Ed Hanley, accountant, 50s, gray at the temples, always trying to sound like a mediator. On her left, Ruth Daly, retired school teacher with a calendar for every holiday, including Groundhog Day. Stan Patel sat at the far end tapping his pen. We did the pledge, we did the minutes. Then Ed cleared his throat and read from a paper like it had been rehearsed. We have received a report alleging an unauthorized tow request involving a law enforcement vehicle. The board takes this seriously. He looked at Marla. She looked at the middle distance. We will hear comments from involved parties. I stood not because I enjoy standing in front of a room, but because the truth deserves a spine. Nate Collins, my friend, parked his unmarked car in my driveway with my permission. I received an email from the HOA saying it would be towed at 7 a.m. It was. Deputy Collins arrived and informed all present that the car belonged to the sheriff's office and could not be removed. The tow truck left. I forwarded the notice to the board as requested. A few mm-hms rippled. Ruth took notes. Ed nodded like I'd read the pledge again. "Thank you," he said. "Any other comments?" The tow driver, who I didn't expect to see, stood at the back. "Name's Rick," he said. "I get tickets. I run 'em." I didn't know it was a sheriff's car until your deputy told me. I backed off. No harm meant nods, murmurs. A lady I didn't know raised her hand and asked if we were safe. Stan said yes, which is what you say when you want a room to stop buzzing. Then it was Marla's turn. She fixed her blazer sleeves like the fabric had offended her. I was following our bylaws. I couldn't know it was a government vehicle. It was unmarked. A voice from the middle, Mr. Ortega from Birch Lane, said, "That's the point. You didn't know, so you shouldn't have acted." The room like that. Heads bobbed. Ed cleared his throat again and squinted at a sheet I recognized as an email printout. "We have the notice here which was sent to Mr. Wilder. We also have a statement from the Rivers County Sheriff's Office confirming the vehicle belonged to them and was parked by permission. Given this, I move we suspend enforcement actions related to that incident and review our policy." A woman with a gentle voice I knew as Louise from Maple Court said, "Suspend the president, too." That's reckless. You could feel air tighten. Marla opened her mouth. Ruth closed hers and looked at Ed, who looked at Stan, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "We can discuss leadership in executive session," Ed said, which is board speak for closed door. Louise shook her head. "No, we pay dues. We get a say. I move to suspend the president pending review." It felt like a church meeting that had tipped into honesty. Hands went up. People murmured their lot numbers. When the count finished, it wasn't close. Ed announced a temporary leave due to stress. We all heard removed. The meeting adjourned like someone had cut a string and let the weight drop. People filed out lighter than they came in. Two of my neighbors patted my shoulder. One man I barely knew shook my hand hard enough to creak my wrist and whispered, "Took guts." I slept well that night. I woke to new weather. Retaliation doesn't always look like a sledgehammer. Most times it looks like 300 small taps. My mailbox post, which had stood straight as a soldier for 10 years, was suddenly leaning. The landscaper said his trailer accidentally clipped it, but he didn't leave a note, didn't knock, and didn't answer his phone when I called the number on the side of his truck. An envelope with no return address showed up in my mailbox. "You embarrass this community. Enjoy living here." I tossed it and wiped my hands like I'd handled something sticky. I received a form letter complaining that my porch light wasn't standard, even though it had been there since I moved in, and half the block had ones like it. A picture came attached. My porch at night, zoomed in. That one made the hair rise on my neck. Then came a certified letter. Violation, harboring a government vehicle. The fine listed was not just petty, it was post-dated, like it had been written before the meeting. I called Ed. He didn't pick up. I called Ruth. She did. "I'm sorry," she said in a voice that told me the job had grown too big for her. "I didn't approve that." "I don't know who did. Please email the board address and I'll make sure we see it." I forwarded the lot. I CC'd Nate. He replied with 2 lines I still smile over when I think about them. "The sheriff's office authorized parking on private property. HOA covenants do not supersede law. This fine should be withdrawn immediately. No legalese. No Latin. Just 2 clean sentences like fence posts sunk deep." 2 hours later, I got an email from the board's attorney, a man who signs his name with a flourish, like we're in the 1800s. "After review, the association rescinds the cited fine. The board will review parking policy at its next meeting, no apology." But I didn't need an apology from a ballpoint pen. I needed the whistle blown, and the game stopped. That's what I got. Marla didn't disappear. People like that almost never do. She started walking at different times, choosing routes that swung past my house, phone always in her hand like a badge. She power walked past one Saturday while I was rinsing pollen off my truck. "Sorry about the incident," she said without slowing. "What incident?" I asked, because sometimes the only way to win is to not play. Her jaw tightened. "You know." "I do," I said. "And so does the county." She kept moving like she was late for an appointment with someone who agreed with her. The agenda for the next meeting arrived with a bright new line. Bylaw reform, vehicle policies. I attended. So did half the neighborhood. Ed opened with a calm voice and, to his credit, a willingness to admit they'd gone too far. We need clarity, he said. No more guessing. Stan proposed simple language. No commercial or marked government vehicles on the street overnight, with exceptions for active service calls and law enforcement vehicles parked by permission on private property. Ruth added a neighborly clause. Short-term guests okay, trailers okay for 24 hours when loading or unloading, because we live like humans, not in a catalog. The room clapped. It felt like someone had opened windows and let in air. During public comment, people told stories. An older gentleman said the previous board had hassled him about a U-Haul the day his wife came home from the hospital. A young mom said she'd gotten a warning for leaving a stroller on the porch overnight. A man in a wheelchair said quietly that a previous compliance officer had suggested he store his ramp when company was coming. The room shifted. I watched Ruth press her lips together and nod, like she'd just gotten the real job description at last. The vote passed. The policy changed. The world didn't spin off its axis. The sun set, and then it rose. You'd think that would settle it, and for most of us, it did. People waved and stopped to chat again. A teenage boy rang my doorbell and asked if he could borrow my air pump for his bike, the universal sign that peace has returned to the cul-de-sac. I fixed my mailbox post and even made it a hair straighter than before, which made me happy in a way that's hard to explain unless you like things plum. But in the corners where resentment likes to nap, a plan was waking up. I didn't know that yet. I knew it when a neighbor I'll call T because I'm not trying to start a bonfire, stopped me at the mail kiosk and said, "Word is, she's talking to a lawyer. Says she's coming back with Parking Crackdown 2.0. He made air quotes like the words tasted bad. I hope she finds a hobby, I said. Knitting, bird watching, something that scratches the same itch without rubbing the whole block raw. People like that don't knit, he said. They count stitches. We laughed, but the laugh had a hollow sound. The days after that were simple, which is another way of saying I noticed the edges. A white SUV I didn't recognize idled at the corner for a minute longer than you do when you're checking directions. An email came around asking everyone to document issues with street parking, which is broad enough to catch anything from a graduation party to a plumber. A man I'd never seen before stood on the sidewalk and took photos of the curb in front of my house, then moved on. Maybe he was planning landscaping for his aunt. Maybe he was collecting data for a spreadsheet. Maybe he was just bored. Or maybe it was proof being assembled like a puzzle with a picture nobody had asked to see. Nate swung by one afternoon in uniform to return a drill he'd borrowed to fix a cabinet hinge at the substation. He stood at my tailgate like we were at a hardware store Bible study and said, "You keeping your head down?" "I'm trying," I said, "but my head seems to be a magnet." He grinned. "If more letters arrive, forward them. Don't take the bait. Let the board's attorney take the board's emails. That's why they pay dues." "Does the sheriff's office do house calls for HOA headaches?" I asked. "We do what the law lets us," he said. "We enforce actual laws. You'd be surprised how often people think their bylaws are laws. They're not. They're agreements, and agreements don't outrank the state. You'd think that would be obvious. You'd think a lot of things would be obvious," he said, handing me the drill. "And yet here we are." I watched him drive away and felt grateful. Grateful for a friend who knows how to be a friend, and for a badge attached to a brain that understands the limits of its own power. Not everyone has that. I know how lucky I am. 2 weeks passed. We breathed easy again, and then the letter came. It wasn't from the board. It wasn't from Marla. It was from a law firm 1 county over, the kind that still uses embossed letterhead and includes the words "and associates," like that's supposed to make you sit up straighter. The letter didn't accuse me of anything directly. It asked questions, which is a clever way to lay foundation. Had I stored any non-residential vehicles on my property for longer than 72 hours in the past 12 months? Had I allowed any person employed by the county to leave equipment in view? Did I intend to continue permitting such storage? And then a line that made my ears ring. "Please be advised that our client is prepared to pursue all remedies available under the covenants and applicable law." Client's name redacted, which is the adult version of I know a secret. I scanned it and sent it to Nate and to the board's attorney. I CC'd the board. I considered adding a picture of my dog just to soften the mood but thought better of it. The attorney replied first. Please direct any further communication from outside counsel to me. Do not respond. Then he added a sentence that read like the legal version of a door closing gently but firmly. The association will not pursue action related to the previously resolved vehicle matter. Nate chimed in. You're fine. Sit tight. That's a lot to ask a person who likes to fix things with his hands. But sometimes a smart move is stillness. Marla went to ground. I didn't see her for a week. When she resurfaced, it was as a jogger with sunglasses and a brimmed hat, which felt like a disguise until I reminded myself that people are allowed to jog. She posted a chirpy message on the neighborhood app about a community yard sale. She organized a porch pot planter class. I went to neither for everyone's sake. I trimmed my hedges. I took down the porch light for a clean, set it on a towel, polished the glass, and put it back up like armor that could gleam. I fixed a squeak in my garage door. I lived my life. The board met again. The attorney attended. He spoke in calm paragraphs about enforcement policy, due process, and the difference between rules that keep a neighborhood tidy and rules that turn one neighbor into a ruler. People nodded. It felt like a history lesson we'd needed and finally got. Ed announced that a compliance committee would rotate members every 6 months and would not be chaired by anyone serving as president. You could feel the block exhale as one creature. Ruth brought oatmeal raisin cookies. I had 2 and put a third in a napkin for Nate. On my way out, a man I recognized as 20 years my senior grabbed my sleeve. You did us a favor, he said. You took the first hit, made it easier for the rest of us to say no, when no is the right word. I just didn't move a car, I said. Sometimes that's the whole trick, he said. Not moving when someone pushes. Summer turned to fall. The maples went red along the boulevard like someone set them gently on fire. On a Saturday, we had a block cookout. Kids chalked rockets on the asphalt. Dogs sniffed everything twice. Nate showed up in uniform because he'd been on shift and then stayed in jeans because he wasn't. He shook hands, ate a burger, and answered questions about why sirens wake us at 3 a.m. without looking put out by any of it. Marla walked by with a paper plate and, to her credit, didn't start a scene. She nodded at me once, a small motion like a truce flag half raised. I nodded back, because I like peace more than I like being right. If that's where the story ended, you'd call it tidy. But life loves a tag. 2 weeks later, a little white envelope showed up in my mailbox with a green strip that makes every American sigh before we open it. Certified, I signed. Inside was not a fine, not a threat, but a request. Please attend a mediation regarding covenant interpretation hosted by Rivers County Dispute Resolution. The list of invitees included me, the board, and one interested resident, name redacted. I stood at my kitchen counter and laughed like a man who'd been hit with a pillow after bracing for a brick. Mediation. They wanted me to explain why a sheriff's car parked in my driveway with permission should be allowed. I poured myself coffee and thought of my dad cutting a board and checking the line twice. Square is square, he'd say. This felt square. But the world being what it is, I suppose we'll draw the line again, this time with a new pencil in a quieter room. If you want to hear how that mediation went and how a quiet room can sometimes be louder than a tow truck, hit like, make sure you're subscribed, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next part, because some folks can't stand a settled story and will shake it until the pieces rattle.